Hello all, I'm Ashwin and I'm the co-founder and CTO at Ocular. We use AI and ML to help retailers achieve faster time to market with their merchandising processes and provide AI-based tools for helping them with your online sales conversions by empowering their customers with intuitive product discovery and personalized offerings. We've also been selected this year into the Techstars Future of E-commerce powered by eBay program, and we're very excited about that. It's an accelerator program specifically focused on driving e-commerce innovation. Now, in our tech stack, we've gone for an end-to-end serverless architecture, and in doing so, we have decided to use Golang in all of our non-ML related functions and internal tooling. So this leads me to talk about what we were trying to do, which led us to discovering and using Fyne. Now, as an early stage startup, we've been very conservative on how much we spend on our DevOps and the ML training pipeline. This kind of meant that we were still not quite ready to make an investment into some third-party tools that could help us with our ML model quality analysis and retraining. We had a very manual process, or we have a very manual process to measure and analyze model quality, which takes a lot of time. And then, therefore, the need to automate some of this was getting more urgent as we scale the number of models we have. We identified that we could develop an internal tool, but we wanted to ensure that anything we did has minimal development and deployment overheads. So Go was an obvious choice to build out a command line based tool. So that we could easily integrate it into our tool chain. But there was also a need to provide some of this capability as an app to our data team to do some ad hoc analysis, as the case may be. One option, or one among the other options, was to build out the analysis tool in Go and expose it as an API, which a web-based app could call and use. But then we came across Fyne and realized that it could provide an easier option in creating a desktop-based app on top of the Go-based tool, using a single code base. In addition, the cross-platform compilation and packaging support in Fyne was excellent and dramatically reduced the effort required in creating the app for multiple operating system platforms. Furthermore, based on some constraints that is, I guess, unique to us in our situation, Fyne slotted in a lot better than other alternatives. So as I decided to build out the analysis tool in Go, and given that my UI development is not my strength, traditionally, I would have banked on another member of my team with UI skills to step in. Alternatively, I would have to invest a lot of my time to pick up the skills required using other frameworks or languages. But with Fyne, I found that it was a simple framework, yet effective, and my high-level familiarity with Java Swing from the past helped me to really pick things up. But the fact that when I used ChatGPT as my co-pilot, I was able to greatly accelerate my UI scaffolding code that needs to be generated. And that really sealed the deal for me. Okay, so this led me to try out Fyne, and the end result was that by employing Golang and Fyne and with an MVC-based architecture, I was able to easily create a command line tool and desktop app. In the code here, we created a controller that could be passed on to the command line mode or the desktop mode based on how the executable was launched. The controller provided most of the analysis code, and the views were associated with the modes. The Fyne code in the desktop view is very similar to many existing UI frameworks and is quite easy to pick up even for a novice. There are containers, and each container has a layout, and the layouts can manage the widgets that you add into them. This is probably familiar to most of you, but if you're new to Fyne, you may notice that it's quite similar to other frameworks. We could essentially now turn our attention to how this app runs in command line mode. There could be other modes that are related to using it in a tool chain. But for now, let us look at how the tool looks like in command line. When we launch it, we need to first load the data. To do that, we need to provide the path to the spreadsheet and the names of the two sheets with the original and audited data that we have. So this, once we do it, generates the report, and we can use the command and query mode to display other reports and views. So if we now launch the same executable in desktop mode, we get a very elegant looking UI. We can go ahead and try loading the data, which has already been preloaded. This time we do the same thing we did in the command line mode and basically point to the spreadsheet where the data exists and select the two sheets for the analysis. This will load and analyze the data and show the default report associated with it. The report is in the form of a table that is managed in one of the built-in layouts. We can now go ahead and show some of the report views. So now in the accuracy view, we're using a tabbed container that contains a table of data per tab. We can then query for the audit view, and this now shows a tabbed container with a list of cards with a table inside each card. Running through some of the tabs shows off the speed and responsiveness of the UI. In fact, if we select a category that has a lot of data, like the women stresses category, we can see that the UI is quite performant and as responsive with a lot more data thrown at it. So all of this was developed relatively quickly, especially as I was learning Fyne at the same time. However, I had some help. I did start experimenting with AI-assisted development for this. This is more a reflection of my own state of mind, as I'm not much of an RTFM type of person. I jump in to any new kind of code base or frameworks or languages, get into all sorts of twists and turns in the beginnings, but then slowly start untangling myself and getting proficient. But I didn't have much time to do that with Fyne. Furthermore, while the documentation for Fyne is great for getting started, some of the other nuances in the more complex UI layouts, it is still not yet fully baked in. Given the relative newness of Fyne, it was not something that surprised me, as I expect that the documentation is only going to improve over time and with community support. ChatGPT turned out to be quite the winner for me here. With some simple prompt engineering, it was able to generate relatively complex UI layouts and the scaffolding code for me. By scaffolding, I mean just getting the UI elements and the layouts and the containers all put in together. So I just kind of had to needed to add the dynamic code for executing the actions, mostly. Now, ChatGPT does hallucinate a lot, so keep this in mind. And it's also not aware of the latest updates of the Fyne framework, clearly, because it has data that it's been trained on since 2021, I believe, up till. But with that being said, it was actually good enough to provide me a lot of the what I call plumbing code. So let us have a quick look at what ChatGPT can do for us with the right set of prompts. If I were to input the details of what my UI needs to do and how I want it laid out, by say, for instance, saying that I need a query area for it, I need a certain container or a tabbed container to show the data in a table, and provide the details and spec that out, um, it should it would then take this prompt and effectively generates the code and code structure for me. We can then walk through this code once it's done with its generation. You can see that from a code perspective, it's provided all of the key elements that's required, the ability to create the tabbed items, the table within that, the structure, the basic structure for it, the ability, the right way to start the framework, and it's all using it with the latest V2 framework that Fyne has. Now, the best thing to do is probably copy this code and go ahead and experiment with it as a starting point. You don't have to necessarily use this to immediately start with your coding. You could just try it out, play around with this. Now, the thing is this, that if you don't find the structure very appealing, or maybe the code structure is not that good, you could try regenerating the code. Now, every time you regenerate the code, it kind of picks out different types of code structures, patterns, design patterns with which it tries to do the same thing. So it's a good way to perhaps even learn slightly some of the other different techniques that you could leverage with using Fyne and just the general design patterns themselves. Um, Look, I still had a few issues from all of the code that was generated, things that I had to manually tweak in the UI itself. Uh, I've had to basically play around with the right layout, mainly so that the table that I'm using filled out into the container completely, as opposed to just showing the first row that happened out of the box from what code was generated. Um, I guess one of the biggest issues I had was in also handling the column widths of the table dynamically based on the data set. Um, that is a bit of a challenge that essentially I've had to dig into the internals of the Fyne framework to understand and use it better. Um, Another aspect I had to figure out from all of this was also to handle the styling for the header row. Um, Now, I understand that the latest version of the tables widget makes it much easier. It's very configurable, so I'm looking forward to using the latest widget, which, by the way, also shows the speed with which the Fyne community is continuing to improve and add to for already what is I consider a very impressive widget set. Anyway, but the point of all of this is that it would have taken me much longer to come to this level of functionality or create this level of functionality that you saw. And perhaps without the support from ChatGPT, I might have probably weighed in on going down the traditional path or given and get somebody else who has more UI skills and experience to come and work this out. I could have probably decided to use a web-based environment, but quite frankly, that meant I would have had to consider adding a lot of user authentication and authorization, and really, it would also meant two different code bases: one for the core and analysis functionality, other for the UI. And I'm not a big fan of having two different code bases, predominantly not from the development point of view, but from the maintenance point of view in the long run. So um, the thing is, this approach by using ChatGPT and just the general simplicity of the Fyne framework was super effective for me to get really comfortable with this and create a decent UI that I might not have prided myself in doing in the past. All right, so the Fyne advantage. So essentially, what really helped us along here, I think I mentioned some of these traits already. It was simple to learn. It was definitely simple to learn without the chat GPT stuff. So at least for me, and that perhaps might vary from person to person, but I think if you have a general awareness of some of the other frameworks, it's easy to pick up. It already has a good set of widgets in the library, so you could do a lot of clever stuff or a lot of nice looking UI stuff out of the box with the widgets that you have. The winner for us is quite frankly the fact that it has fantastic cross-compilation support. It also uses this add-on project called Fyne Cross for it, and that helps us package it for different OSs in a professional manner as was required for each of those platforms. Go itself does a great cross-compilation support, but Fyne adds the power layer on top of it to ensure that it's packaged for by the requirements of that and not just creating binary for each of those platforms. And I've really found the community, while still growing and I think relatively small compared to other language or framework communities, it's extremely responsive, and that helped us a lot. So it's a huge plus there. Now, the advantage that was specific to us, I guess, is that our code base was one now, right? So we had just one code base, mainly for all the command line style tooling, as well as command line operations, as well as the desktop app. It was easy for me to package it and deploy it to my data teams. They all were, a lot of them are on different OSs, some of them on Linux, some of them on Mac, some of them on Windows. So it is quite important on that aspect. And the fact that with the combination of a co-pilot, an AI co-pilot, if you have a development team of Go developers, they would all be quite effective in using Fyne for the UI tooling needs. So I guess I would like to kind of start closing this out by talking a little bit about what we'd like to see improve. None of these are showstoppers in my opinion. Documentation, I think it's one of those things that you'll always want to see more improvements to it. They have done a great job from a starter point of view, and it's very easy to get up to speed with the existing documentation. But I think a few of the nuances can be better captured, and perhaps it will be, and I'm 100% sure of it, as the community grows and the usage grows. So in trying to, the examples I gave before and trying to making sure that the table column widths were properly calculated, so on and so. I think a little bit more documentation to help somebody starting with it could be better. But that's definitely going to change very soon. If you want to rely on platform-specific features, this is more of wish list, and I think people can debate on both sides of this point of view. But for instance, the file chooser dialog, it would be nice, in my opinion, if the file chooser dialog was much more as close to the OS in terms of its UX, as opposed to some of the more Fyne-specific UI there. The point being, some of our team members, if they're not too technical, they're a bit phased by trying to work with something new. But it's, again, a minor irritant. I think once you get used to it, you'll know how to work with it. But if it was having some elements that was closer to the operating system, like something that interacts with the file system, so on and so forth, it would be great. But it's not a showstopper at all, and it's just a minor irritant. Now, when it comes to testing, it was interesting. Most of us are on a Mac, some Linux, no Windows in our team, unfortunately. So our hope was that we could use VMs on our Mac systems to kind of test it for Linux, Windows. While it was true for Linux, it wasn't true for Windows. We had some OpenGL support issues. I guess the Fyne framework uses OpenGL, and in the VM environment, there wasn't an OpenGL support. I'm pretty sure it can be fixed. I tried to see if there's a ways to work around it, but I didn't spend enough time to come to the point where we fixed it. So we essentially couldn't actually test this on our Mac systems on a VM, Windows VM. So we had to basically go and find the actual Windows system to do it. So very minor things in terms of what we felt could be improvements to the framework, but all in all, it was a breeze developing with Fyne and creating the UI. So really, the conclusion for us is that if you have invested in Go teams, and even if especially Fyne should be your number one, at least option to look at in terms of creating desktop apps. Now, there are other advantages to it. Clearly, the apps that you create can be used on mobile devices as well. It wasn't a requirement for us, but that's an actual value-added advantage. That once you create this app, you can easily use it on a mobile. It is responsive design uh, aspects of it are handled there, and that's something we'd like to tap into maybe for some of the other tools that we're doing. So it's not something we really needed right now. So if you're already invested in it, without a lot of rewriting of your code or doing different frameworks, you've got a tool that fits both desktop and other development. We intend to use Fyne for more of our internal tooling, and we suspect that this approach would be beneficial for others if you have similar requirements. And I strongly, and I do believe that as Fyne grows, it could be a very good framework for non Go developers as well, especially because of its really good support for multi-device. So an app that you create here can easily be used, consumed on your desktop, mobile device, and even the web. And really, that's something that I wanted to conclude with. I hope you've got a sense for what led us in our journey to use Fyne. And maybe there are certain things that you could pick from it and see if that would be applicable to all of you as well. Thank you.